hence the PMI guide. So that traditional way of working continued until the 1990s. I'm sure some of you in this room might remember the dot-com bubble, when the tech world wanted to produce or deliver projects at a very fast pace. They looked at this waterfall way of working and said, this doesn't work for us. We need more efficiency, we need to be faster, we need to be quicker. So things like extreme programming, RAG, Scrum started coming into the market because they wanted to execute projects quicker. At the dot-com bubble, if we remember, you went to bed, by the time you woke up, there was a new company, there was a new product. So what we started seeing when the digital world or the tech world started using this new concept was that the productivity started to actually increase compared to the construction industry. The construction industry continued with our traditional way of working. This is the way we've always done it. We continued in that way. Then the 2000s came, when the agile way of working hit the market. And that was when the deviation in productivity and efficiency really took off between the two sectors. The digital world increased the efficiency so much that today they are operating at 96% productivity. Can anyone guess? So if you, when my presentation gets there, I don't want you to talk, but can any other person guess the productivity within the construction industry at the moment? Any guess? Any guesses? Yes? No guesses? Okay. The tech industry is at 96%, construction is at 21%. We are the second worst productive sector in the world. We're only better than agriculture. Right? That's the only sector we're better than. Productivity in construction is abysmal. But what we saw after 2000 was the PMI guide also started veering more towards the digital way of working. And a lot of the guys in the industry started saying, this PMP, it's a wonderful certification, but it doesn't speak to me on my day-to-day basis. But then the pandemic happened. That was where we were all exposed. Because we all remember here, the tech world came back online. The laziest of companies, it took them a week. Most came back online in 48 hours. Construction for a year, we didn't actually realize what we're doing. We're just trying to understand what was going on. But that was one of the things that led PMI to think, why is there such a delta in productivity, and how do we actually try to help improve efficiency within the construction industry? And of course, the industry also came to us and said, we want you to actually help us, support us with understanding how to actualize and eke out more value and more productivity in the industry. So to do that, we did some research. And the first one we looked at was a McKinsey research to actually understand what was happening on the macro side of the construction industry. Construction, yes, is the biggest sector in the world. It accounts for 13% of global GDP. But it's only grown by 1% in 20 years. Think about it. Any sector that has grown by this amount will be dead right now. But because we have a huge government element to the construction industry, we've been throwing taxpayers' money, they've been propping us up with all our waste, we've continued to tick on. Secondly, is that McKinsey said that what we need today to deal with infrastructure deficits in the world by 2035 is 69.4 trillion. I was actually corrected of Saudi Arabia that only Saudi in the next 5 years is looking to spend 360 trillion. What this suggests is that we need to be more efficient because no government has this kind of money. So every dollar we're given needs to be better used. And last but not the least, I always say Kenya is an anomaly for me because this is the first time I've walked into a construction conference and I see young people and women. Normally, when I turn up in any country, it's old guys sitting down looking at me thinking, okay, we've been doing it this way for 30 years, right? The skill gap we have in the industry is a big shocking one. 41% of US workforce is looking to retire by 2031, and this is consistent across the world in every country. Today, it's easier to find a young civil engineer in a startup than in a civil engineering company. Why? Construction is not cool. We also decided to actually look at our own PMPs within the construction industry. And what we saw was even more shocking. 7 out of 10 projects in construction end up over budget. 7 out of 10 projects end up over budget. Some will argue that it's actually higher than that number, right? 7 out of 10 projects end up delayed. And 7 out of 10 projects end up with a scope creep. Scope change order has become a culture for us because we do not care to plan or design well, because we know, oh, don't worry, you can always go for change order. But what's even more shocking is that for every $1 billion spent in construction, 127 million is wasted. That's 13%. I was again told in the Middle East, is more of 30%. And I'll argue in Africa it's closer to 50%. And in my dear country it's more of 80%. Right? So we said, but we've talked about how could this be? How could we be getting these numbers? We were quite stringent in talking about costs, the quality, the time, the project, what we call the project triangle. It's been something that's been written about for years. So we decided to actually speak to the industry to understand from them what are the real issues they're seeing. And what they said to us, while cost, quality, and time are very important, actually for them, the problems are quite different. They said one of the biggest issues they have is ineffective communication. Right? That what we have in the industry is that people can't communicate. And it's a big issue in the industry. The second thing they say to us is that changing project requirements is not a culture, as I just mentioned earlier. It's something we take for granted. Nobody cares. Secondly, is that because we're now having to manage very complex projects, the skills we need to bring this thing together is multidisciplinary, and who can actually deal with bringing all that in a cohesive way to make sure we run projects end to end in an efficient way. It's a big problem today. Think about it. To build something like the Burj Khalifa, can you think of how many skills that came together to deliver that? And even the normal road that we have today, because we're talking about sustainability, impact, there's so many things assets are expected to do today. So we have that's the world we live in now, and we need to we really need to change the mindset of the way we actually run projects. One other thing they talked about is that the poor design we have in the industry leads to poor execution. We do not take time at the design phase to think it through. We say, just the can-do mentality in the industry, which is a good thing, but has actually now left us in a lot of problems. Another thing is that The industry, because we're all wonderful engineers and wonderful in numbers, we found ways to manipulate the metrics that we use, which now fosters the wrong behavior. One of the things they actually said was that the contracts which we have today, or which we've been using, are not fit for purpose. And there's a lot of disputes, there are a lot of projects that have been finished, but they couldn't hand them over because there's one litigation or the other going on. And last but not the least, is that the industry has said no to technology and innovation. You know, a lot of guys here, especially Kenya, which is I call the Silicon Valley of Africa, want to bring in these new tech. But in construction, guys will tell you, no, I've been doing this for 40 years, this is the way we do it. And they use old equipment to do the same thing. So what PMI did when we looked at all this is that we said, yes, while it is all well and good that we have over 50 years experience in project management in the industry, we needed to partner with other organizations to develop something that speaks to the actual issues of the industry and not focus on cost, quality, and time alone. We wanted to embed that into whatever solution we came up with. And one of the things we wanted also to make sure is that we don't take the silo approach we're taking in the industry today, because we look at cost alone, quality alone, time alone. We look at them in little silos. We wanted a holistic view that took all these things into consideration and be able to deliver the change which we want in the industry. So what we did was that we partnered with the Lean Construction Institute, the LCI, which are the guys at the forefront of the lean ways of working in construction, and the Construction Industry Institute, which are at the forefront of agile ways of working within construction. And what we call agile ways of working within construction, excuse me, is really a data-driven approach to delivering projects. Because the agile concept at the core of it is just using data to make decisions, picking data from the client and it's informing what you're trying to do. And stop what we do in the industry today, which is just to use our gut feeling or estimation or whatever you want to call it. We also decided to work with all these companies. We decided to bring organizations from all over the world that are involved in construction to also be part of developing this new course, because what we wanted to make sure was that what we were developing was not just speaking to ourselves, but these guys were also bringing their expertise from all over the world to actually make sure that we build what is a world-class standard. Project managers are now being demanded to not just be championing the execution, but to connect the execution to the strategic layer. So more and more, we will be challenged about a project. What effective goals are we driving with this asset or with this project? Thirdly, is that we want to drive more impact. We want to get more people involved in the construction industry and to professionalize what they do. So people that are artisans, that have not had a formal education, what we want to get to is a world like they have in the digital world. So some developers never went to school, right? But why is it that they are paid gazillions? It's because the way they've structured the sector, they all understand how to deliver value. And that communication and education started with the project management layer. That's why a developer that is not a project manager understands what Scrum means, that we're running a sprint. He's just a developer, but he understands, he doesn't need to be a specialist in it, but he understands the concept. That is where, but when you have a tradesman, because I forget the suit, I also go on site. When you have a tradesman that have done something and you say to him, dude, understand, this is the rule, this is the law, this is the way we have to do it, and this is why we're doing it this way. He will go off and do his next job and do it properly that way. And it's the job of the project manager to actually communicate that. And lastly, we need now to embed sustainability in every project we do. It's going to become a bigger demand going forward. Because financiers today are refusing to fund projects that are not sustainable. It's a big thing in the industry today. And we are going to get more, we're going to get that realization even more as more COP27 or more, as these things happen more, the change and the demand will be there. So the 7 courses which we have as part of this course, let me just go through this. I know I have only about 5 minutes. Is that these are the, sorry about the too much text on it, but I'll try to go back, but I'll try to just speak about what each course tries to cover. One thing I want you to take away about each of these 7 courses, that what we've done in each of these 7 courses is that we've taken a lean approach to each of the courses, a data-driven approach or agile approach to each of the courses, and a system approach to each of the courses. So when I say communication, built environment project communication pro, we're explaining how do you set up your communication strategy in a lean way, how do you use the compass tool to measure your communication and identify where there are communication gaps, which is a data-driven approach, and what systems do you use to implement the Obey concept, which is a lean way of communicating, and how do you set it up? Now, once you have gone through the course, you will understand as a project manager today how to actually do that. And when you set up your project that way, because you're using a lean method, you're using an agile method, and you're using systems, invariably, your project will come in cheaper, so you've taken care of cost, on time, taking care of time, and quality. So this is the approach we took, and we embedded those things in all through the courses rather than dealing with them in silos. So that was the thinking behind this, and this is the new approach, the way we actually see ourselves approaching projects. So the Project Communication Pro talks about, I have only 5 minutes, ways to set up your communication strategy, how you manage your stakeholders, how you communicate with them, how you keep track of your project and in an objective way show people what you're trying to do. And we'll talk about the Obey concept, which is akin to the Kanban process, which we have in tech, where it's the big room where you, instead of having the design team, the implementation team, the O&M team, not speak to each other at the start of a project, why not front load it, have a project manager that understands the end-to-end of the project, and have a technical person, just one technical person from each side, so that what is being designed can be implemented and can be managed. In tech, it's a standard. But today, we have the design company sitting in Paris. They'll send us things that nobody has ever seen. Then the guys that will implement it will tell you, the contractor will tell you, it doesn't work like this. Then the guy that will operate the asset will tell you, Jesus Christ, how did this guy build this thing like this? So what if we actually did that front loading initially using the Obey concept, which Toyota has actually used in building some of their cars, to get everybody in the room, that front loading, plan. Was it Abraham Lincoln that said, if you have 10 hours to do something, use 8 to plan it. Plan it properly and be very detailed and very clear on what we're trying to do. Then you see that the execution becomes even cheaper and quicker. Right? So that's what we're advocating there. The Built Environment Performance and Materials Pro will talk about what are the right KPIs that you use to enforce the right behavior within an industry. Within your project, sorry. And the type of materials you use. Are they sustainable? Are they future-proof? How are you applying? What systems are you using? Does it allow for changes in legislation, which we know that is now going to be even coming faster and quicker? How are you? So that's some of the things. Are you testing your KPIs? When people have circumvented your KPI, how much are you checking that this KPI is actually giving me the reality of what's going on in the project? That's what we are trying to speak about in that course. Then the scope and change order management. Scope change. before you implement a scope change, have you actually gone through the thorough of explaining what the scope change means from a resource point of view, from a strategic point of view, and how do you use the scope of a project to tie into the strategic objective of what your client is trying to achieve? Whether the client is just an individual or an organization, we think that your scope should be able to speak to what they're trying to do. The next one is the contract and risk. How do we use contracting to deal with some of the bad behaviors we have in the industry, where people lowball and come in and know that they will we have scope changer, we will always continue changing, coming back and coming back and coming back. How do you use contracts to deal with that? How do you use contracts to make sure that clients pay on time? So the company organization, so how do we use contracts more effectively within the industry? And we actually go about giving you some systems and templates, because we know that you're not lawyers, but to get an understanding of what these contracts mean and what you should actually be looking out for in a contract. The interface management talks about looking at the project from a holistic point of view. Construction, we have a unique situation where we have different teams or different organizations doing, we subcontract a lot of things. And what tends to happen when we subcontract is that we lose track of the whole scope of what each person is doing. You end up with either companies doing the same thing or missing out some scope. How do you look at that project from an end-to-end point of view and make sure, even if there's a change, how you bring it in and how you deal with it? Then we have the execution planning and built environment project. Yes, critical path is still a very good approach, but we know it has its own limitations. So we'll talk about AWP, LPS, CCSU, so advanced work packaging, last planner systems, and the rest. How to use them, where to use them, the differences between these different approaches, and how they can actually impact your project and support your project. And last but not the least is the built environment technology and innovation pro. I see that we have the BIM guys in the room today, which is good. We talk about the BIM technology. But not just BIM, we talk about other systems in the industry, the data analytics side of things. How do you fuse data analytics with BIM to have a digital twin? How do you use drones rather than sending human beings on site, on dangerous places? How do you, modular construction? How we're talking about, and how do you infuse the culture of innovation within your team? This, for me, was the last thing I was actually doing in the UK before I joined PMI, and it was shocking. Whenever you turn up to a project manager and said, bro, can you actually fit this IoT device on the road or on an asset? They ask you, have you tested it for 30 years? And I keep on laughing. I go, in 30 years, this will be so obsolete that nobody will be using it. BIM is actually a technology from the 1970s, but we're still popularizing it in the industry. How do we move forward to start using things that are being developed in the industry? Because what we're trying to do is to explain the thinking behind these technologies so that project managers will start to understand these technologies and be happy to bring them into their projects and know that it does not create any problems. I'll just go straight to this because my time is gone. How is this different from the PMP? This course is a sector knowledge certification, and we require that you have at least 3 years experience before you actually take this course. The reason being, a lot of the concepts we're talking about are very practical based. If you've never been on a construction site, you won't understand what we're talking about. So, and we expect you to be able to apply the knowledge immediately in your projects. That's the reason why we request for that 3 years experience to be able to take the certification. And lastly, why bother? Why do you need it? One of the things that we did with this course is that we brought organizations together, and we want to continue with that industry engagement. Because the industry today, contractors are not in the business of education. They're in the business of delivering construction projects. So the issue we have is that when they develop their internal curriculum, it never gets updated as time moves on. So what we want to do is to continue that active engagement with the industry. And what I would love to see is to see, you see those logos at the bottom? More African logos there. More African companies there. Because what we are seeing is that we now need to set a global standard within the construction industry. That's one of the biggest issues we have in the industry. We call it one thing in this market, and another market, we call it another thing. There has to be a global standard for people to actually be able to work cohesively. But not just that, to also deal with the skill shortage that we have, because more and more we will need skills to transfer from one market to the other. So this is one of the main things we're trying to do with this certification. And secondly, what we've noticed in the construction industry is that a lot of the project managers in the industry come from an engineering background. I'm an engineer myself. While we all were trained on our technical skills, we were not trained on how to manage projects, deal with human beings, run projects, all the complexity that is involved with project management. That's the skill we're trying to actually provide the industry with. So a lot of us became project managers with can-do mentality. Let's actually learn how to do it properly. Thirdly, is that if you understand what I've just said, if you do things in a lean and data-driven way and you're using the right systems, you end up being more efficient, more profitable, and have a very sustainable project. But last but not the least is that the industry, they see us as cowboys that don't care about the people that work for us. This is also a way to show people that work with you and that work for you or that belong to your organization you actually care, by trying to impact them with a cutting-edge skill. So thank you very much. I'll be around for most of the day and happy to discuss even deeper on some of the thinking behind it. But what we need in the industry is a mental shift, because construction is the biggest polluting sector in the world. Until we fix it, we might not have a world for our younger ones. Thank you very much.